Have you ever wondered why the kindest hearts, the ones who love deeply, listen softly, and forgive too easily, always seem to fall for the ones who fear love the most? It feels unfair, doesn't it? How the empath, the giver, the healer, the one who sees beauty in broken things, ends up drawn to someone who hides behind distance, silence, and control. But it's not coincidence. It's connection, the kind that's born not from comfort, but from recognition. Because when a super empath meets an avoidant, something ancient awakens. The empath sees pain and calls it potential. The avoidant feels warmth and mistakes it for danger. Two opposites meeting not by fate, but by unfinished lessons. They orbit each other in silence, one trying to heal what they didn't break, the other trying to escape what they don't understand. And in that quiet pull, between closeness and fear, love and control, a dance begins. A dance that feels magnetic, yet exhausting, beautiful, yet painful, real, yet unreachable. This is not a story about weakness or strength. It's the hidden psychology of emotional connection, why the light is drawn to the dark, and why the ones who love hardest often attract the ones who run fastest. Stay with me, because once you understand this dance, you'll never chase the wrong kind of love again. Super empaths don't fall for avoidance by accident. They're pulled toward them, like light drawn to shadow, not because they want to fix someone, but because deep down, they understand what it feels like to be unseen. They sense the wounds others hide, the quiet ones, the kind that don't bleed, but ache. And instead of running from that pain, they lean in, they listen, they soften, they make the other person feel safe, maybe for the first time in their life. The avoidant, at first, doesn't understand what's happening. They used to love feeling like pressure, or control, or expectation. But this love feels different. It doesn't demand, it invites. And that invitation, to be seen, to be felt, to be known, awakens something they've long buried. In the beginning, it feels like healing. The avoidant starts to open up, their guard lowers, their eyes soften, they feel warmth where they once felt walls, and for a moment, they believe maybe love isn't danger. But for a super empath, that warmth comes with a cost, because every time they give more, every time they pour their heart into someone who keeps pulling away, they begin to shrink inside, not because they're weak, but because they start carrying both hearts. They love for two, they hope for two, they heal for two. And that's when the bond turns heavy. The empath begins to feel the weight of someone else's fear, mistaking it for their own responsibility. They think, maybe if I love harder they'll stay. But the truth is, love can't heal someone who fears being loved. Still, the empath doesn't hate them. They can't, because they see the pain behind the distance, and they remember what it's like to be afraid of love too. That's the emotional paradox of this connection. The one who wants to heal ends up hurting, and the one who runs from pain ends up causing it. And yet, they both feel something they can't forget. A connection too deep to explain, and too fragile to hold. Stay with me, because what happens next is where the real conflict begins. The empath wants to love deeper. The avoidant wants to feel safe. But what connects them also breaks them. It's a silent war, not fought with words, but with distance. One moves closer, believing love can heal the cracks. The other steps back, believing distance can keep them whole. The empath reaches out, not to control, but to comfort. Yet to the avoidant, that comfort feels like danger. Every gentle gesture, every moment of closeness, it starts to feel like a trap they can't explain. So they pull away, they go quiet. They convince themselves they just need space. But the truth is, they're terrified. Because when someone gets too close, the walls they built to survive start trembling. Meanwhile, the empath feels the shift instantly. The cold tone, the delayed replies, the quiet distance disguised as busy. They feel the energy fade before the words ever do. And inside, the empath begins to panic, not because they can't live without them, but because they can feel the disconnection. Empaths don't just love with their hearts, They love with their nervous system. They sense every withdrawal like a storm brewing in silence, so they try harder. They explain, they reach, they give. But the more they give, the more the avoidant retreats, confusing love for suffocation. It's tragic, isn't it? Both want the same thing: safety, trust, connection, but they're chasing it in opposite directions. The empath finds safety in closeness. The avoidant finds safety in distance. So love becomes a cycle, one chasing reassurance, the other chasing control, both tired, both misunderstood, both protecting their hearts in ways that hurt them more. And still they keep dancing, not because they enjoy the pain, but because something in that push and pull feels familiar, almost safe. Because sometimes the pain you know feels safer than the love you don't understand. Stay with me, because in the next moment, the reflection begins. You see, an empath feels alive when they give love. Their peace comes from connection, from feeling someone's soul open under their care. Love, to them, is expression, a safe place to pour what they carry inside. But for the avoidant, love feels different. Their peace doesn't come from closeness. It comes from control, not because they don't feel, but because feeling too much once cost them everything. They learned early that love can turn cold without warning, that the ones who said "I'm here" could still leave. So they built distance, not to punish, but to protect the fragile parts they promised no one would touch again. To them, love feels like exposure, and exposure feels like danger. So the empath gives, and the avoidant guards. One believes that love is the bridge. The other believes that love is the risk. It's not that they don't understand each other. It's that they understand too much. Both recognize the pain in the other, but speak different emotional languages. One says, "Let me in." The other whispers, "Don't leave me." And somehow, both are saying the same thing: "I'm scared." This is where the reflection begins. Not in blame, not in who gave more, or who pulled away first, but in understanding that both are fighting ghosts, memories of love that hurt them before they met each other. When you look closely, you realize it's never really you they're running from. It's the version of love that once broke them. And when the empath learns that, their pain starts to turn into clarity. Because sometimes, it's not about fixing the connection. It's about finally seeing it for what it is. A mirror of two people trying to feel safe in completely opposite ways. And once you see that truth, you stop chasing the story. You start observing it, calmly, quietly, like a soul finally realizing that love was never the enemy. Fear was. Stay with me, because now, the power begins to shift. There comes a moment when the empath finally runs out of words, not because they stop caring, but because they've said everything love could possibly say. They've explained, they've waited, they've forgiven, and yet nothing changes. So one day, they stop. It doesn't come with anger. It comes with exhaustion, the kind that doesn't scream or demand, just quietly decides, I can't keep teaching someone how to love me. And that's when the shift begins. Because when an empath pulls back their energy, the energy that held the connection together, the avoidant suddenly feels something they've never felt before, their own silence echoing back at them. For the first time, the quiet doesn't feel like safety. It feels like loss. The peace they once protected begins to sting. The distance they once needed starts to feel hollow. They scroll through messages that no longer light up. They check stories they used to ignore. They wonder, were they really the problem, or was I just afraid to be loved? That's the power of detachment. It's not revenge. It's reflection. The empath in silence finally understands. Love doesn't need to be proven. It needs to be matched. And when it isn't, the most powerful response is not more giving, but gentle withdrawal. That silence carries weight. It becomes a mirror the avoidant can't escape, a reminder of everything they thought they didn't need, until it was gone. And in that stillness, the empath's energy transforms from longing to awareness. They start to see that love doesn't disappear. It just stops flowing where it isn't received. This is where the control begins to shift. The avoidant, once the one who ran, now feels the absence they created, and the empath, once the one who chased, now feels the peace they deserved all along, because when the empath stops overgiving, they stop bleeding for connection, and that's when the true healing begins. Stay with me, because now comes the realization, the moment everything finally makes sense. It was never just love, it was recognition, two souls meeting in a mirror of old pain, one trying to fix what broke, the other trying to hide what still hurts. The empath doesn't fall for the avoidant because of affection, they fall because of familiarity. There's something hauntingly known in that distance, that quiet unpredictability, that push and pull tension that feels like home to their nervous system. It reminds them of the love they once had to earn, the love that came with silence, approval and conditions. And for the avoidant, the empath feels like safety dressed as danger. They bring warmth, softness, and truth, all the things the avoidant secretly longs for, but doesn't know how to hold. Because deep down, connection once meant exposure, and exposure once meant pain. So they run, not from the empath, but from the reflection the empath creates, because in their eyes, they see the parts they buried, the softness they suppressed, the love they didn't believe they deserved. That's why these two always find each other. It's not fate, it's unfinished business from the past, wrapped in new faces, new timing, and old emotions. One seeks to heal, the other seeks to escape, and somewhere in the middle, they mistake the familiar ache for chemistry. But here's the truth. Every time the empath chases, they're trying to rescue the version of themselves who once wasn't chosen. And every time the avoidant withdraws, they're protecting the version of themselves who once got hurt for needing too much. It's not love that binds them. It's history repeating itself in disguise. The empath's heart says, if I love you enough, you'll finally stay. The avoidant's fear whispers, if I stay too close, I'll lose myself again. That's the loop. That's the silent dance that keeps pulling them back into the same story, until one of them wakes up and realizes, you can't heal your past by loving someone who reminds you of it. You can only heal it by loving yourself enough to end the cycle. One day, it happens quietly. No fights, no closure, no dramatic ending, just silence. The empath, the one who once held every space together, stops explaining, stops proving, stops chasing something that never wanted to be caught. They no longer fight to be understood. They simply disappear from the noise and return to their own peace. At first, the avoidant doesn't notice. They mistake the calm for relief, thinking they finally have their freedom back. But freedom feels different this time. It's too still, too hollow, because the silence that once gave them power now starts echoing back everything they ran from. The quiet feels heavy now. The absence, loud. There are no messages to ignore, no emotions to avoid, no warmth waiting at the end of the day, just stillness. And in that stillness, a haunting realization. They weren't avoiding chaos, they were avoiding love. And for the first time, the avoidant begins to feel, not the thrill of control, but the sting of emptiness, the kind that no distraction can fill, because what they lost wasn't attention, it was safety, it was softness, it was someone who saw them, and still stayed. Now they replay it all in their mind, the unread messages, the half goodbyes, the eyes that begged for connection they couldn't give, and slowly, regret starts to grow, not in words, but in silence. The empath doesn't come back this time, not because they stopped caring, but because they finally learned the difference between love and self-abandonment. Their distance is not punishment, it's healing, and that's what breaks the avoidant most, because when the empath finally walks away with peace instead of pain, that's when the avoidant realizes what real loss feels like. Not the loss of control, but the loss of someone who was safe enough to love them through their walls. And in that quiet moment, their heart whispers the truth they never said out loud. I pushed away the only person who saw me and didn't run. So if you've ever loved someone who couldn't love you back, don't carry it as a wound. Carry it as proof that your heart still knows how to feel. You weren't naive. You were brave. Because it takes courage to love someone who hides from love. It takes strength to see beauty in brokenness and still choose compassion over resentment. You were never too much. You were just the mirror that showed them everything they refused to face. Their fear, their longing, their walls. And sometimes, that's what real love does. It doesn't always stay. It transforms. Maybe you were not meant to be their ending. Maybe you were meant to be their awakening, because through you they saw what safety could feel like, and through them you learned what self-respect truly means. So let this be your peace. You did not lose love. You revealed it. You showed someone that tenderness exists, that patience has power, that silence can heal. And now, as you walk forward, don't close your heart. Keep it open, but guarded by wisdom. Because one day, someone will meet you where love no longer feels like effort, where connection feels calm, and being seen feels safe. Until then, remember, the empath's love is never wasted. It plants awareness in others, and strength in themselves, and that is the purest form of love there is.